Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Wheen and I'm a paediatric physiotherapist. I've been working with children with disabilities for many years now, and I'm also the CEO of Gympanzees. And today we're here to talk about proprioception, which you may have heard about from your occupational therapist or physio. It is an amazing sense of ours and can really help loads of children. So what is proprioception? It is one of our 7 senses. So you all know the basic ones: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But we also have 2 others. Your vestibular system, which is kind of where your head is in space compared to gravity, and it's really helpful for our balance. And then we have our proprioceptive system, which is the sense which kind of lets us know where our body is in space. So if I close my eyes, I know very well that my hands are moving around and I could probably tell you where, and I don't need my eyes to do that, and that's your proprioceptive sense. It's really key in feeling safe in your body and in your environment. If you have good proprioception, you don't bump into things. You can walk down the stairs without having to look exactly at your feet, or you can take your spoon to your mouth without having to look at it, or you can walk along the road holding something in your hands or talking to someone else, because you know where your body's going to be. It's stimulated by receptors in your joints and in your muscles. And these, when they're put on stretch, the messages go up to your brain, and your brain works it all out, works out where you are, and then will tell your body what to do about it, if there's something to do about it, if you need to adjust or move, etc. And if you've got good proprioception, it means that you're going to have better coordination, better balance. You can move your arms and legs without having to look at them, and you can negotiate your body within the environment. So there are loads of conditions that will have poor proprioception, and it's kind of on 2 different sides. So either it is the messages that come into the brain, so get the right messages come through your muscles and joints, go into the brain, and they're not quite processed properly. So this can be any condition with any kind of brain abnormality or brain damage, so things like autism or dyspraxia or ADHD or sensory processing disorder or cerebral palsy, one. Many of these you won't necessarily have proprioception as the main thing, or it won't be the main thing, it'll just be part of their condition. The other side is caused by actually what's happening in the muscles and in the joints. So the first one is hypermobility. It's really common hypermobility. 1 on 10 of the population in the world has hypermobility, and it's basically just having flexible joints. And so your ligaments holding your joints together are just a bit loose, so you can move just a little bit more. But having that mobility means that you're not quite getting the same messages coming from your joints up into your brain. So you may not feel exactly the same as you should. And then there is low tone or high tone. So low tone is hypotonia, and that's generally where the messages from the brain into the muscles are telling them not to work hard enough. So children feel quite floppy. And this again can be part of many other conditions. So things like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, ataxia, and many of the undiagnosed syndromes, genetic conditions. And if they're not feeling, if they haven't got the tension in their joints and their muscles, then again, the messages just aren't coming up enough into the brain. The other side is high tone, so hypertonia. So that's when your brain is telling your muscles to work too hard. So children get a bit stiff. And that stiffness means that muscles and joints aren't, again, working quite as they should. And because of that, they don't get the same stimulation to go up to the brain. So that could be things like cerebral palsy or SMA or some of the muscular dystrophies, and many more of the kind of neurodevelopmental difficulties. So how do you know if your child has a problem with their proprioceptive system? There are a lot of different clues to look out for. Often if children find it difficult to follow directions, then you just need to be watching what they're doing rather than trying to test for them. But if they can follow instructions, then one of the tests is with their eyes closed, can they put their finger to their nose? My proprioception is rubbish, so I get it wrong. But that, if they're ending up here or if they're really off the mark, that's one good sign. Another one is just standing with their eyes closed. Do they wobble, like really wobble or fall down? And another one is, again, with your eyes closed, can they take the heel of one foot against and make it go all the way up and down the shin of their other leg? So, they have to have the coordination, the understanding, etc., to do that kind of test. If they can't do that kind of test, then it's more about watching what they're doing. So they may show any of these signs, and you kind of need a few of them. Just one on their own probably isn't enough. So the first one is being clumsy. Do they walk into things? Do they trip over things? Are they wanting to hold on to the banisters? They're going up and down the stairs so that they know that they're not going to fall anywhere. Do they have problems with throwing and catching or hand-eye coordination things? They can't be looking at the ball and at their hand at the same time, so that could be difficult. Do they overuse their sight? So are they always looking at what they're doing? When they've got their pen, are they really watching what they're doing? Or if they're going down the stairs, are they watching their feet really, really intently? These wouldn't be the children that you want to give them something in their hands as they're walking along, because that could make them fall over or bump into something or trip. They may not be able to control the force at which they do things. So things like they may want to, instead of just letting themselves down on the floor, they may crash onto the floor, or bump into people, or press really hard with their pen, or not hard enough, and they hardly make a mark on the paper. They do things like slam doors where they only really meant to close it, or when they pat you on the shoulder to say, oh, silly mum or whatever, they actually whack you, or their siblings. They kind of chew everything and need that big sensation, that big input. And then if they don't feel they're very safe in their body, which is kind of what happens if you don't have great proprioception, you just don't really know where you are, it can feel quite unsafe. So they'll be looking for ways to make themselves feel better. So if you're not feeling where you are in space yourself, then you may want to put yourself up against a solid object, because if you're leaning against a solid object, you can't go anywhere, and you know where you are. So some children like being up in corners, up against furniture. They'll be the ones who squeeze into the tiny little gap between the sofa and the wall. That's where they want to hang out. They may really want to have hugs. Hugs are like the best for proprioception. Your whole body can feel, especially a whole body hug, whole body feels where it is, and it feels really, really great. That's why we all like it. Some of us like it. Things like, are they always touching themselves? Do they always need their arms crossed across their body? Are they squeezing their bodies? Do they squeeze their fingers or tap their teeth? Or kind of have their hands on their chin, or be leaning their hand on their hand, instead of just having their head loose. Do they wiggle in their chair, like really trying to feel the chair underneath them, or do they rock a lot to try and feel where they are, especially rocking up against the back of the chair? Some children will tap their heads against a wall or against their headrest. And bouncing is the other one. Do they love a bounce? Bouncing gives you loads of great feeling about where you are. Do they like being tucked up at night? So do they like a really heavy duvet even when it's the middle of the summer? Or do they really like it when you stretch a sheet over them and tuck it really tightly in? Do they like heavy clothing or tight clothing, or just things that are heavy? Do they always take your legs when they're sat on the sofa with you and put them over their legs so they get that kind of impact? or do they really kind of cuddle up to you and need to be leaning up against you? Or the other one is having their joints on a stretch. So when your joint's on a stretch, you can feel it. You really feel where that joint is. So sometimes if you don't know where your body is, actually going on this stretch makes you go, oh, that's where I am. So it could be that they have a W sitting position, like in the photo, or they stand on kind of one leg hanging their hip when they're standing, so they don't stand in between the two legs. Or when they stand, they really push their knees back. A little doll here, so push with their legs that way. They're really trying to push to the end, stretch out their knees. Or they could do things like over the edge of the sofa where they hang, get some really big stretch into their backs. So any of these could be indications, but you'll probably recognize a few of those. So what are the benefits of stimulated proprioceptive system? So it's twofold really. One, if your proprioceptive system isn't great, then you want to stimulate it lots, because if you stimulate it lots, they'll be able to feel more safe, know where they are, and then they'll be better at their gross motor skills, their movement skills, and their fine motor skills. So one, it's just actually to help them with that system. But generally, for every child, the proprioceptive system is actually the sensory system which calms and regulates all the other systems. So if your child is hypersensitive, so they're more sensitive than they should be to, let's say, sound. So if going into a classroom where there are 30 people talking and every child sounds like they're talking directly to them and they can hear every word everyone's saying on huge volume, that is incredibly overwhelming. And children can take this for a bit maybe, but in the end that can be why they would have a meltdown, because it's just so much input coming into them. Whereas actually if you can give them some kind of proprioceptive input, maybe before they go into the classroom or while they're in the classroom, it can actually calm the others down. So it's a brilliant system for children who've got any kind of other sensory issues. So for children who seek sensory stimulation, so for your kind of adrenaline junkies as well, proprioception can kind of, giving some kind of proprioceptive income can kind of calm them down so that they can be a bit more still and focused on what's going on around. But also for children who have difficulties with social situations, so proprioception again can just make everything just feel a little bit better, which means that they're in a better place to interact with others. So it is huge. And how do you stimulate it? So there are three main ways really. Most children actually who have a proprioceptive dysfunction, or they are looking for proprioceptive input, will have discovered some of the stuff on their own. They will gravitate towards, like sitting in the corner of the sofa or having your legs over their lap. They will have found stuff that feels really nice for them, which is brilliant. And you want to be led kind of by what feels good for them, as long as it's appropriate to the situation. So you can't go into their classroom and sit with your legs over them in their classroom, or when they're heading off to work in the office. They need something which means they can give it to themselves instead of someone else giving it to them. So the three ways really is anything that pulls joints apart or pushes joints together. Both of those will stimulate those receptors, which will go up to the brain. So that's two of them. And the third, which is a little bit contentious in the kind of sensory world, is anything which gives your body a big indication of where it is, like squeezing. So if you can really squeeze that limb, it gives you a really strong indication of where your body is. Soft touch doesn't work. It needs to be really, really deep. And it could be things like vibration can give you that really big indication of where you are. A strong massage or hugs or compression, just the whole body being squeezed. And often this can be put into something called a sensory diet. So your sensory diet is just like your other diet. It kind of is your sensory input throughout the day. So for children who have difficulties with their sensory processing, or who you want to work at their best at certain times in the day, it may be that they need something from their diet just before or while they're doing their activity. So that's something to talk to really with your occupational therapist if you think that this could be something to help, especially in school, actually at home. And if everyone's doing the same kind of thing, then that makes it easier for the child to understand, and hopefully to start taking some of that on themselves as they get into adulthood. So, things to do at home. So the first one is heavy work. Like we were saying, anything that pulls your joints apart or compresses them will stimulate your proprioceptive system. So anything which is heavy is going to pull those joints apart. If you imagine holding onto a big box that's pulling at your wrist, that's pulling at your elbow, it's pulling at your shoulder, get loads of proprioceptive input. Things like digging, again, that's pushing your joints together. Things like hoovering, unless you have one of these really great new hoovers, which you hardly need to move around. So something with resistance, right? Basically something which is hard to do, pushing a heavy trolley. So when you go into a supermarket, the first thing you do is put a few cases of beer at the bottom of the trolley, and then the child pushes it around while you do the rest of your shopping. Then you can leave it there if you want. You know, a light thing for them to push around won't feel very safe because they don't know where their body is and they don't know if it's going to run off with them. So you want something really heavy. Things like making the bed, if you imagine shaking that duvet, all that pulling on all your joints. Wrestling safely, again, they may not know their own strength. So I have to be a little bit careful with this one, but it could be, we had a lovely mum who was telling us that her son gets into bed in the morning and has to push her out of bed with his feet. And that resistance that he gets first thing means that he then has an easier time after that. And same thing with moving furniture, laying the table, anything you can think of that actually gives them some weight. Helping with cooking, so helping carrying the heavy pans. And then there's, because your body, your kind of trunk bit, often doesn't have the same proprioception. It's the same as your arms and legs. Actually, if you keep it moving, then your joints and your muscles are always moving and always giving you some feedback into your brain. So if your child's really fidgety and can't stay still, it may be that if you have something underneath them that moves, like sitting on a wobble cushion, which is like a cushion filled with air that you can get on Amazon, or sitting on a gym ball or something, then underneath them is always moving. Their body's having to keep moving to be able to stay upright and to get that feedback, but they're not actually running off everywhere. So that can be really great. Something like wheelbarrow walking. So if you take them start by taking them, if they're on their tummies, start by taking them by their hips, and then they have to push up on their arms, and just show you a little bit. So you would be here and they would be there, and they have to walk around on their hands, and you start holding them here, and then as they get better you can move them down and down and down, and there's all that weight going into their hands, which is really great. And you can make lots of games with that, picking up bean bags, etc. Weighted items is another thing. So anything that can give them that extra weight, again, is compressing those joints together. So a weighted blanket or a weighted waistcoat. A lot of these things you have to buy and they're quite expensive. So if you can try and see if you can find cheap alternatives at home to just test whether it works before you go spending a fortune on these things. And you have to be really careful with the weight as well to make sure it's appropriate for your child. But what you can do is kind of make weighted snakes. So fill a plastic bag or the end of a pillow with sand or beans or peas or something that can add some weight, and then see whether they like it on their lap or see whether they like it around their shoulders. You know, it's instead of your legs, basically. Another really good one is wearing a rucksack. So because it's very appropriate for a child to be wearing a rucksack, just put more in it. So see how much they would like. So it should be enjoyable for them. They should really like it. They will probably start asking for their rucksack. So if it's too heavy, they won't want it. So it needs to be light enough that they can carry, but heavy enough so it really presses through their shoulders and they really feel it. And this is a lovely one going to and from places. So if you're out in public, or if you're going from home to school or you're walking to see friends, this can be a really lovely way to kind of prepare them for that next step, to prepare them to get into school or prepare them to go and see their family or friends. Another one is squashing them. So there's something called a hot dog, where you roll the child in a rug. So the child has to have their arms down by their sides, and you roll them up in the rug, keep their heads out. And then when they're on their back, they're already being nicely squeezed in that rug. You can get a gym ball and kind of press it down on their bodies, along their bodies. And you'll often get children asking for their hot dog. It feels really great. So compression items is the next one. So things that actually squeeze their bodies. So you can get high tech, like a lycra suit, but again, you kind of want to see whether this kind of thing's going to work. And a lycra suit is something your physio or OT can help with, but test it first, because some children, all of these things, every child is so different, and it may be that they have a really terrible proprioceptive system, but they really don't like compression, but they love weighted stuff. And it could be that they've got a very mild proprioceptive issue and they love all of it, or they don't like any of it. So you have to just test these things before going and spending money. So tight clothes or skins, Sports Direct currently have some good lycra clothing. There are, again, from your therapist, lycra belts or lycra shorts. But yes, it can just be that you find them some clothes that are just too small for them, and just see if they like that tightness on their bodies. And then pulling and pushing items, so things that you can get, so squidgy toys, those stretchy, kind of funny feeling toys that they can pull apart, or stress ball that they can really squeeze. And you can make your own stress balls out of flour and a plastic bag and a couple of balloons. I think on our YouTube channel there's a video about how you can do it. But that feeling of, and that's why a stress ball, that's why people like a stress ball, because it's stimulating your proprioceptive system. It's great for strengthening your hands. Or another one, if they need to sit still, that works quite well, is tying a kind of rubber band or elastic around either the two of the chair legs, or two of the table legs, so that they can just have their feet on them, bouncing with their feet. Again, it means they're staying in the same place, they're not getting off their chair, but they're getting that proprioceptive input. Feel really nice. Impact exercises. So they are often children who want to be pretty active because it feels really great. If you think of anything like jumping, running, gymnastics, anything like that, you're getting loads of impact, loads of squashing of those joints, you're getting loads of proprioceptive feedback. So trampolining can be brilliant. I know a family whose children will trampoline for 3 hours when they get back from school, and then they feel great. And that's what they need to kind of transition from school to home. Boxing, that kind of impact, not air boxing, but actually having a bag that they can learn to box against. Things like cycling at low gear, so with loads of resistance. So just the kind of getting the legs going round really fast doesn't feel great. You need to have that resistance and pushing against something. That's when it feels really great. Throwing and catching heavy stuff. So if you imagine throwing and catching a heavy ball, every time it's really pulling your joints apart, and then you're pushing it away as you throw it, and that again gives you lots of stimulation. Monkey bars, or hanging from your children's from the parents' hands. So you can take them by their hands, or they can hold on to your wrist, and you just lift them up and just see how they like hanging, because hanging pulls all your joints apart and it feels really, really great. That's the same with climbing. Climbing's brilliant. Any kind of climbing walls, climbing frames, climbing on furniture. Things like just general aerobic stuff. It's got lots of jumping. Yoga has lots of stretching. And then strengthening exercise, so anything with press ups, sit ups, it's all heavy work, so it all compresses your joints and feels great. Walking feels a bit meh, whereas if you're walking uphill, that big having to push through those legs feels much better. And if that's too easy, get them to run. So with proprioception, it needs to feel kind of a bit hard. If it's easy, then you're probably not stimulating the system enough. There's some examples of just some stuff that's happening in Bristol. Okay, so because this is such a brilliant system, you want to stimulate it before you do something. So if you know that your child is really, they want to do something with their friends, they want to be in the local football team, but they are a little bit clumsy, and you want them to do as well as they can when they go there, or you're trying to teach them how to hold a pen, and you want to really prepare them so that they get as least frustration and as much positive experience from that learning. So you prepare them in advance, and just before if you can, and it means that hopefully they'll just do a little bit better. And we all learn by enjoyment. If we don't enjoy something, we're just not going to practice it, and you need to practice things to make them better. So if we can make them as successful as possible in these activities, then they're more likely to keep them going. So before fine motor activities, so before activities which use your fingers, you want to really give them lots of input into their arms. So lots of squeezing down their arms, massaging. You can even use some cream and do a proper massage, and then pulling at their fingers. You can try it yourself. It feels really amazing. Pulling at the end of your fingers gives you a big indication of where your fingers are, and it feels there for a bit. You're still feeling, oh, that's where my hand is. Or pulling your joints, or pushing, squeezing your fingers together, pulling them apart. Brushing, you can get kind of a nail brush, or there are these surgical scrubbing brushes which can be really nice. So squashing, maybe that their hands are on the desk and you just squash their hands down, and all this stuff, they should be learning to do it for themselves so that they can prepare themselves before they do an activity. It may be that in sitting, that they sit on their hands for a little bit to give them a lot of input into their hands. Or something like theraputty. It's basically like firm Play-Doh, so you can make it out of Play-Doh and just leave it out a little bit, maybe to make it a bit firmer, just so it's a bit of hard work for those fingers again. Hide things in the theraputty, so your little toys that they have to really get their fingers in to try and open it up, and that gives that good hard work for their fingers. So that's fine motor. Gross motor, in standing, you want to push down through their hips. So here you'd have your hands on their hips and push down with their legs straight. That will just compress all the joints down in their leg. Jumping on the spot, jump as high as possible. Then when they leave the ground and come back to the ground, they're getting that really big impact. It's lovely. Pushing against the wall, try and push the wall over again, that's compressing the joints. Pushing their hands together, or pushing against your hands. Again, pushing down, if they're sitting, pushing down through their shoulders so that it's compressing down through their spine. Or you use the vibration and the firm massage around their body as well. And if they're small, you can just hold them up by their ankles or hands. Make sure that their joints are okay for doing that. But yeah, that can feel really nice for them. And then for the mouth, so for a lot of these children who put stuff, a t-shirt goes in their mouth or a jumper goes in their mouth, it's like they're trying to stuff their mouth full of stuff. The mouth is massively sensory. The mouth has so much going on there, and it really gives a lot of input back into the brain. So if children aren't getting enough proprioception in the rest of their world, they'll try and get it in their mouth. So lots of chewing and gritting teeth, just chewing into anything they can find. And sometimes it's biting, that kind of thing, because they're not feeling properly. That doesn't necessarily feel as pain. It can feel as, oh, I've got a big impact. This feels really great. So things like vibrating toothbrush can be really good, and you want it everywhere, really, around the lips, inside the cheeks. There are vibrating teethers where when they bite down on them, that's when it vibrates, and then they let go. You have to be quite careful with vibration because it's a very full-on sensory input, so they need to have control. You don't want to leave something vibrating on them that they can't take off, because they will, yeah, it's not great. The crunchier the food, the more they're going to get back. So if they can crunch Or you get them, if they really need to be crunching stuff, then they have those chewy sticks or chewy tubes that they can crunch on. You do have kind of necklaces and bracelets that they can chew on. Blowing is another really good one. So blowing gives lots of input around the mouth, but you want to make it as hard as possible. So blowing bubbles is quite easy. Blowing cotton wool through a straw is quite hard. Playing an instrument can be even harder. And sucking works really well as well. So that could start with a dummy. It could be the thumbs, or you want it with straws. So you want something really thick that's hard work. So a milkshake that they have to suck through a straw before they go and do some socializing with a friend. Or ice. Ice also gives loads of indication of where you are, because it's pretty full on. And so crunching or sucking on ice. And that is it. I hope that's given you some ideas of what to be getting on with. It is brilliant, and you'll find you can just be led by your child rather than thinking you have to try everything. See what they're enjoying and follow their lead. Thanks everyone. Take care and see you soon.